Hey everyone, my name is Pedro Moreira da Silva and I'm a staff product designer working on the AI integration initiative. And I'm going to share with you what I've been thinking for the UX framework of this AI effort, the different lenses of how I'm seeing this, and some of the ways that I think we can connect the experiences and the patterns that make this experience. Both the patterns that are currently being explored, as well as some of the patterns that I'm predicting we will need to tackle soon. So first, let's look at the different lenses. The first one, scale. So for this, 3 levels of scale: focused, supportive, and integrated. So focused is the is the one that puts the AI in the foreground the most, and integrated is the opposite. So it's when the AI is integrated into the current context, it takes a back seat and it's more in the background. Still foreground, but more integrated, as the word says. I'll show you in a bit how that can be potentially represented. Then we have the approach. So different ways that teams can approach the problems. So one is automating tasks, and automating tasks is basically about increasing efficiency of humans. So we're using AI to completely replace human decision making and actions, and this should be done with the user's consent and awareness, so that they know what is being automated and how. And the one that we're seeing now more explored in our effort is the augmentation. So we're augmenting capabilities, and that is focused by increasing effectiveness of humans by supporting and improving their decision making and actions. So right now we're not doing a lot of automation. It's more about helping users do what they already do, but with more effectiveness. We also then have interactivity, so how you interact with AI, and right now basically 2 ways: proactive and reactive. Proactive meaning that it doesn't have any user interaction for the AI to output content or perform actions. And reactive is based on user interaction, and we will see how that of these are represented next. And the last 2, problem and effort, is what the teams have been mostly focused on, and that has to do with the problem. There are many categories that we could put here and have different names across the industry, but to simplify, I've narrowed it down to just these 3 categories. So classification is about taking categorical data and that is not continuous and doing tasks like categorizing, suggesting, ranking, and matching. Generation is about summarizing, explaining, or creating content. Prediction, which is also called regression, is about forecasting continuous non-categorical data. So things that have to do with number values and things that are not categorical, as the word says. And then finally, we have the effort about implementation, 3 levels that have already been described in the beginning of this effort, and it has mostly to do with the implementation. So being an ad hoc task, which is an immediate API response. Then we have the next level, which requires more work, which is to pre-process and fine-tune the data and the model. And then finally, we have custom models and custom implementations that need to be built, and that we cannot use an API for responses. So how all of these lenses come into effect in the framework. So this is what I'm seeing right now and what I'd like your feedback on, probably here in Figma, to keep it as quick as possible. So here I have 3 columns with some lo-fi mockups. And again, this may or may not be how we represent the user interface. I don't want to over prescribe. And so that's why all of these are very low fidelity. So the first one is focused. Or actually, let me start the other way around. Let's start with integrated. So, or actually, since I'm improvising this, let's start with the middle, supportive. So supportive is what people are already familiar with, the chat interface, what everyone talks about. And the chat interface, as it says here in the summary, is a single thread which is aware of the context and may allow potentially in the future to navigate and create different threads. And it's a multi-turn conversation where you can ask questions to the AI, you can make requests, and all of this happens in this chat interface. So here, the approach is more about augmenting the capabilities of humans by providing them with more information or information in a format that is actionable by them and that makes them understand what is happening. It is also an opportunity to suggest automations and also suggest navigation. So we can have the AI at a certain point suggest, hey, do you want me to do this for you since we're talking about this? Or they can suggest, hey, you should try navigating to this page or this section of the platform to perform this. It covers basically all problems. In terms of interactivity, it's reactive. So my idea here is that this should only be summoned by the user with their awareness. It should not pop in out of nowhere like Clippy. And then, yeah, we can talk about the transitions later. So here's an example of how this can come into effect. So we have a button, which in this case is very clearly says, help me fill this form. And you click on this, and with the ability of having this support on the side with AI, you chat with it and it helps you fill out the forms, the form fields here. And this can also happen across this whole flow or wizard. And this is the supportive. Let's now take a look at the integrated. So integrated is when it's already surrounded by the context, the main context. In the supportive, just to remind, we have the main context, which takes over most of the space, but we have this aside, we have this drawer to support you during those actions. And here we have this example of the search, or command palette. So when you trigger it, you have the ability to ask questions or request things from AI. Maybe here we can have a question that the user made. We have the answer here, and the user can then even potentially click here to initiate a conversation with the AI and ask follow-up questions about this answer. We can also suggest other related questions or things for the user to do based on this question or this input. And it's basically a mini version of supportive, right? So something like this can even be integrated in the docs site if people want really quick answers about their questions. And it's also similar to what the initial proof of concept for the Tanuki bot did. It can transition to supportive, as I showed. So you can have a button here that you click, and it shows you the sidebar with the drawer, so you can continue a conversation with the bot, and can also suggest automations and navigation here with some buttons if we want. Another pattern that we're exploring is the help. So having a call to action in the help menu that triggers the ability for you to ask help from the AI using our user documentation, or even other questions related to the platform, the instance that you're running on, if you want help debugging something or finding something. So this here is a trigger to transition to the supportive mode. Here we have another pattern, which is integrating AI into text areas. Here we see a markdown text area. It potentially could also be used in a normal browser native text area. So here in this markdown area, the problem is the generation of content. So AI is helping with generating content or modifying it. It is interactive. It's reactive. So you'd have to opt in into using the AI, and it is automating the creation of content. Potentially, we can also think about clicking a button and moving into the supportive mode with the sidebar drawer in case people want to ask more questions about the content to AI. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but that's something that we could explore. And this pattern of the text area could be implemented anywhere that users need to create long form content. Another pattern that may emerge is the ability for AI to help users create content in smaller inputs, smaller form fields. In this case, we have an example of a list and AI helping users create a query for the list to find whatever they're looking for. So instead of having to deal with the query builder that we have to filter issues list, for example, you could type out in natural language what you would like, and the AI will build the query for you. And this pattern could potentially be applied to many inputs across the products. Similarly, we can think about transitioning this to supportive in case someone wants to ask more questions about the data that they're looking at, or how do they build a specific query to filter the list. Another potential pattern is the scoring of list items. So when we're listing many items of a specific object type, we may consider using AI to score or prioritize or rank. In this case, it's the ranking pattern to rank these items. So automatically ranking vulnerabilities based on a number of different factors, or ranking issues based on the popularity. So it takes a lot of the content and comments into account, and it creates a more natural ranking system. And because all of this is using AI to score the list items, we may need to provide explanations inline. So again, this is still in the integrated scale. And here we see a popover that provides explanation of why this item was ranked in a certain way. What does the score mean? And again, we can consider transitioning to the supportive mode if people want to ask more questions about the object or how this was scored and ranked. We then have the pattern for summarization, which is something that some teams are working on, code review for merge requests, and also in plan with Libor working on summarization of issues and potentially epics. And two similar ideas that may actually have use cases is having a pattern to summarize the discussion in line. So you're looking at the activity and you can click a button and it provides a summary on demand. Again, with a button, if you want to ask questions or somehow manipulate this summary with the help of the assistive, the supportive mode. Another potential pattern for summarization is having a block of content that is automatically generated by AI in the description. So in this case, this is not in the activity, it's part of the description of the object, a merge request or an epic or an issue, and using some kind of notation and syntax in the markdown area, you could create a block which is dedicated for summaries. And the summaries kept up to date, or we could add a button here that users can click, and it would automatically update and keep this up to date with the AI content. This would not be editable by users. It is a block of content that is specific to AI content. Again, these are all just ideas. It doesn't mean that we have to do it this way. It was just me exploring potential patterns of how we could deal with this. Another integrated pattern similar to the one we've seen here in the ranking is providing explanation in line by selecting a piece of code or a word, a sentence in long form prose content, and having the AI explain that for us, or defining a word or translating it, whatever it is. And then again, we also can have many actions. One of them is to transition to supportive mode for users to ask follow-up questions. And finally, the charting, and this is probably the only example I could come up with for the prediction problem. And this pattern is something that Libor already worked on for the deployment frequency chart, which is part of the DORA metrics. And with the button to show the forecasting data, it might also be helpful for users to recognize that this data was generated by AI, and also have the ability, either here in the legends or in the tooltip that appears when you hover over the charts, or here in this control, have a way to trigger the supportive mode in case you want to ask follow-up questions about the data or the forecasting or something like that, or even to help users interpret the data. And so these are the patterns that I was showing you for the integrated and how we could move these integrated into supportive. And then now an example of how from supportive, we could potentially look at the focused scale. So from here, as I was saying in the beginning, we may need to create or allow users to create separate threads and navigating between those threads, depending on the context that they are, so that they can maintain, for example, separate threads at the same time for different contexts. For example, one regarding a vulnerability, another one regarding creating a CI YAML file for another project. And from here, we may need to have a transition to a more focused mode. So here we see almost a maximized version of supportive that allows you to navigate and create threads, and also navigating back to the original context. For example, if this conversation was started in a specific issue, maybe you can have a link there for users to navigate back to that issue. And this would be an entry in the personal work navigation with the list of threads that you have open, maybe allowing users to delete the specific threads or renaming them like ChatGPT does, and then also the main thread itself. So yeah, I invite you to take a closer look at this Figma file. I'll share the link with the link for this video, and I'm open to your comments and questions about all of this. If this makes sense to you, if it doesn't make sense, if you recognize other potential patterns that are emerging that we would need to take care of. Overall, what I'd like is to try to find specific people to design and handle specific patterns that are identified here, so that we can have BRIs and we can properly explore these patterns and abstract them for all teams to work in. The prime example right now is supportive, where Michael Lee is working on this chat interface that can be reused by different teams, but we have so many other patterns here that can be, and I would like to have other people handling them. I've already reached out to Libor to talk about this text area pattern and also the summarization, and he will be syncing with Alex from Code Review to understand what are the overlaps and who can be the DRI and handle the design of these patterns. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to your comments.